Imagine having access to a tribe of mentors, experts in the biggest questions in tech. This is Making Revenue Tick. So we've actually just finished recording the episode. So Rich Patterson, for people who are just joining us now, what are they going to learn about in the next 60 minutes?
Man, a lot. They're going to learn the 5 buyer codes, why we think you should prioritize it in your organization over all the old sales processes that were built before TikTok. You're gonna learn a little bit about the journey in terms of like how we came to the conclusion that it's time to, clearly understand the why behind why people buy. And yeah, man, I think you're gonna have some fun listening to it.
Absolutely. You know about the 5 love languages. Now it's time for you to learn about the 5 buyer codes. So without further ado, let's roll the VT. Hello and welcome to Making Revenue Tick. I'm joined by pod alumni, one of my great friends, Rich Patterson. Rich, how you doing?
Man, I'm good. I'm happy to be back on with you. Seems like it's been a year or more. Probably not, but it feels like that.
What's funny is when you came on the first podcast, you spoke to Tolu and we didn't know each other. And then we've become very good friends. So
that's right.
You're doing something really interesting right now. And I would love to do a whole podcast about bringing this amazing thought that you've had, that you've turned into a thing that's going to revolutionize the sales industry. So that we can bring people on the journey with us, because I know you're still in the building phase, right? And I think that if people can learn about what you're building now, you're hitting this point that's so prevalent to them that I believe that anyone who's watching this podcast or listening back to it, this could be the start of them closing a hell of a lot more business and being a lot more successful with their sales teams. So are you ready to roll?
I'm ready. And I appreciate you saying that, Richard, because I think all great entrepreneurs start with something that they believe in, and in some scenarios they're trying to sell it, and people might not be catching on, but they believe in it. And this is one of those things, I think, for me, that I'm excited to bring to the public more than anything that I've ever done.
Well, that's a beautiful place to start. So let's talk about what's the problem that you're helping people to solve.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in sales for 23 years, 15 plus in sales leadership. And if you ask any salesperson, what impacts them the most negatively, what is the thing that they carry from day to day, I think they would tell you it's the lost deals. It's the deals you never hear back from. It's the ones you have to move to stalled. It's the ones that are ghosting you. And over the course of the past, call it 5 years, I've had the luxury of working and call coaching and observing more than I have necessarily having to be the point person and selling every single day. Don't get me wrong, I've probably been on more calls than most people, because you multiply how many reps you have, and I try to be on every call, at least every impactful high revenue call. And I think through that there's something that I was able to see in terms of the lens that I think most people aren't able to see. And a lot of that comes from my training and history. But yeah, it was just, again, you hear it all the time, light bulb moment, but it really felt like a light bulb moment almost 4 or 5 months ago.
I love it. I think when you are able to take all of your experience and then you sort of pull your head above the parapet and you get that kind of like helicopter view down, and you go, I'm starting to recognize some patterns here. And like everyone's making the same sort of mistakes because we're just accepting the status quo, or the solutions that we're trying to address the problem with aren't really fit for purpose, and they're not really achieving the outcome. So if you think about that problem of people getting stalled deals, and being ghosted and how complicated it is to sell and all this sort of stuff. And then we go, well, there's all these macroeconomic conditions that are affecting it. And how could anyone be successful? You can't have that mentality. You have to go within my locus of control. What can I do better to achieve a better outcome? So I love anyone that takes these problems that we all accept and that we see every day and go, right, well, that's enough of that, because that's going to stop 99% of people. But how do I be in that percentile who see the world a little bit differently and can recognize some patterns and change my behaviors and change my attitude to go and fix the problem? So I love it.
The other thing to consider too is the problems 2 years ago, right? The problems 3 years ago aren't necessarily the problems that reps have today. And so that's the other thing to consider is, maybe you might have that perspective, you might have that, experience or that right idea, but the timing isn't right. So if you look at a lot of the people that are successful out there in terms of like sales coaching or sales leading, it seemed like they had been, solving the same problem for many years, and then all of a sudden the problem is exacerbated, and now they're in a position like the whole world is kind of looking for more meetings, and the guy that was teaching social selling for the past 5 years is all of a sudden he hit the lottery ticket because the whole world is looking for more meetings. I look at it similarly in a sense that, I think the problem today, people think it's meetings, they need more meetings, but what about the meetings that you have today, and how come we're not converting on them?
Yeah. So what's changed, let's say in the last 12 months in sales?
So technology has changed the buyer journey. So today, when you're on calls and your sales reps are on calls and your, sales leaders are on calls, 67% of the customers are coming well-researched, well-equipped, already in decision-making mode for the most part, right? That's very, very different. The idea was, go back only 2, 3, 4 years ago, customer shows up to a call. Really, the majority of the call, you're trying to, educate them, right? They're not necessarily familiar with your product. They might know of a competitor, but they don't know of you. They haven't invested the time into researching, which is essentially why they took the call, right? This whole process is now flipped upside down. And so brands and decision makers actually show up to the call. 67% of them, think about that, almost 70% already know who you are. They know what your product does. So it really changes the conversation.
Yeah. Even if they say that they don't, right?
Right.
Even if
Right.
they go, yeah. So tell me about your company and tell me about what you do and how you've helped people. They're oftentimes validating to see what
Oh, yeah.
they mean.
Yeah, just to hear what you got to say. Yeah, I had that happen very recently where a guy showed up. Interesting enough, this guy was a billionaire, multi-billionaire, had sold a e-commerce company probably like 4 years ago. It's something well known that you've heard of, right? It's a household product, and he started a new company and he was looking for a new fulfillment house. And he shows up to our call and he has probably about 15 different prompted AI questions with the answers on our service. So when I tell you, Richard, that this guy pretty much knew more than the rep that was on the call, or you know what I mean? Like, I built the company 2.5 years. This guy's 8 years of data that he's collected, and he's asked and pivoted the right questions to prompt, negatively. He would go in with negative questions to find, the areas that would be challenging for any sales rep to handle.
Yeah. Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
things changed. Things have definitely changed.
And I think we'll continue to change, or how much we want to get into this right now. Maybe we'll talk about it at the end when we talk about how this is going to sort of, continue to be relevant as the future changes. That AI is only doing more and more research, and whether they'll be buying agents and selling agents that support people. I think what a lot of the time they do is they're looking at a situation. Let's say it's the situations part of spin, and they're looking at the company data, and they're looking at things like, oh, you're going to be speaking to a CFO, so their likely problems are these, but you've seen a gap in that thinking. So tell me about the gap that exists in the way that most people research companies from the way that you have experienced. There's a better lens to look at the problem through.
Sure. I mean, this might not be popular, but I'd say all of us that were trained and taught in sales, that the persona tells you everything that you need to know, is very, very misleading. And what I mean by that is there can be multiple CFOs, right? And yes, their day-to-day role requires them to be looking and digging into financials, right? But that does not mean that that is how they buy. So psychologically, when they go out and purchase a car, when they go out and purchase a home, right? There is a way that they like to purchase. And just because they have a title at work, that does not tell you how they like to buy. And so you can take every title across the board, and there is no true congruency based on their title and how they purchase. Sure, there might be some commonalities, but it is up to you, the person that is having the conversation with that prospect and customer, to identify what is the way that they like to purchase, so that you're truly meeting them, right? And when I say meeting them, you hear so often, oh, we pride ourselves on a customer centric process. Well, what does that mean? What does that actually mean? And your reps understanding the basics of buyer psychology, you can't get more customer centric than that.
So what I'd be curious to ask is, some people might be listening to this and going, well, look, we do ColorWorks or Myers-Briggs, we have some sort of personality testing, maybe that they did years ago, maybe that they're still using today, but there is a different lens at looking at people through their behaviors and their personality. What have you found is ineffective in those broadly known systems in the world of sales?
Let me ask you a question. Here's a better way to think about it. Do you know it just because you've learned it? Do you truly know it just because you've learned it at one point, right? I learned algebra when I learned algebra when I was in school. If you put a formula in front of me, an algebra problem in front of me, I most likely couldn't solve it, right? I'm not using it. I may be true, never really adopted it, right? I might have just memorized it. And so I think when you look at many different sales processes, right? Or, some of the stuff you're talking about, like personality tests and all of that, if the organization or the reps within that organization, when your sales leaders in your sales team hasn't truly adopted it, meaning they use it every day, it's a part of their process, do they truly know it? And so we spend months and we spend hundreds of thousands of dollars building out sales processes and incorporating them into your organization. But I bet you if you ask 8 out of 10 reps that have been trained on some of the major sales processes that we're very aware of, or personality testing, very few are using it.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
Very
I
few.
agree.
The last 50 people I've managed had no clue how to use any sales process that was ever incorporated.
Why do you think that is?
Well, a couple reasons. Number one is they weren't the ones who went out and researched it. They weren't the ones that actually decided this is something that I want to use on a day-to-day basis. So I think buy-in is number one. Number two is these processes are not simplified, right? They're very complex, right? And they're really built for, in most cases, and again, this might be a hot take, but when you think about spin and you think about spiced and all of the sales process, which, by the way, the latest one that was built 10 years ago, and that was Spice. 10 years ago. The rest are 20 plus years old, right? For the most part. So when they built all of the real reality was they mostly are for the CFOs, the CEOs. They're mostly for communication, right? And alignment across your organization. They're not specifically built for sales reps. They're not. And the truth is, if your sales process is older than TikTok, we already have a problem.
It's a great point. I think it's so true in most parts of industry. is that we pick up these systems and then they stick because, you know, you have to know the systems, right? It's like if we're doing a assignment for a revenue leader and they don't come in with a solid sales process understanding, then they're going to get disqualified, right? We hear it all the time. Yeah, just didn't really, they weren't really able to articulate MEDDIC, you know, or MEDDPIC or whatever it is. And people that can articulate systems in a clear way, I think always have an advantage over people, because people like to sort of go, well, there is a way of doing things that gives us a more predictable and consistent outcome. But when did we learn those things, and what was the world like when we learned those things? From a talent perspective, I think it's really interesting because everyone talks about skill will, and skill will was based on the 1970 situational analysis model. And then like in like, I think it was 1998 or 2002, someone created skill will. I'm going, well, that was built for like a corporate world where everyone works in a 3,000 person company and you were just testing how hard does someone work and, you know, do they have the skill? And I'm like, in a startup, as an entrepreneur, you have to have so many different roles and so many different skills. How on earth do you plot people onto this matrix? It's just far too basic. And you can use it across any industry and any role. Skill will would work for accountancy, engineering, sales, bookkeeping, whatever you want to do. And that's like, well,
Right.
surely there's a better lens to go and look at this stuff through. But maybe let me play devil's advocate, which is people who bring new systems in. There's like the fundamentals of the fundamentals, and the fundamentals don't change. But you're not talking about changing fundamentals here and disbanding all of those behaviors. You're talking about looking at how people buy. So why have you zeroed in on the way people like to buy as such a big area of leverage for salespeople?
It's very challenging today to create true connection, right? You know, we're connecting through, you know, this video call, right? In a perfect world, you know, you're in London or you're outside of London and I'm here in Fort Lauderdale. We'd be hanging out. We'd be doing
In
this
the perfect
together,
world, I'm in
right?
Fort Lauderdale with you, not in London.
Right. But when I say a perfect world, I mean, if you ask, probably 9 out of 10 salespeople will tell you, I prefer to be in person. I think I can build a connection faster, right? I can build trust faster. So understanding that that is the biggest challenge, is building trust, right? Building rapport, but more than anything, it's establishing a true connection in a short amount of time. So understanding that that really is the biggest challenge. If we focused on what's most important to the person that we're talking to, right, then there's a better chance of us forming that connection quickly. And so the analogy that I continue to use, right, till I'm blue in the face, is you take love languages, the 5 love languages. The book has sold over 50 million copies. It was created 20 years ago, right? And it simplifies the psychology behind how people want to be treated, right? To form a true connection. If you ask your wife what those are, those 5 today, Richard, she would know those 5. If I ask my wife, she knows. As a matter of fact, my daughter's 16. And yesterday we were in the car and I said, do you know my love language? And she said, of course I do, Dad. Right? She said, it's quality time. You know, like she knew right away, right? Think about that. 20 years later, she understands the basic psychology of forming a connection quicker. So if you apply that same strategy, because it's the same need, we're trying to create a connection earlier. So the same strategy, and just understand how these buyers buy in a simplified way. Number one is it's going to be easy to adopt. Number two, it's going to resonate forever. And that's the goal. You want to be able to understand this so that it lasts a lifetime, so that any CEO or any sales leader can roll this thing out and have adoption and have like long-term success with it. You know, they're not trying to create a new process a year, 2 years later, because this is, you know, the most important part of the framework. And I'll add one more thing to it, Richard. You don't have to substitute what you're doing. You don't have to go away from sales processes. However, I would argue, if I had the choice of incorporating this buyer framework or one of these old school sales processes, I absolutely would be going with the framework first.
So if we meet people where they're at, right? Because I think one of the big challenges, if I think about the way that I was taught to sell, which was spin, And like behind this screen, I have the Sandler pain funnel.
Love it.
So like this, like proper understanding a person's challenges, the impact, the gap, like all that good stuff. And then
Yeah.
how they've been trying to solve it. Like, what's the implication? What's the need? I love that consultative way of selling. But where I find it goes wrong is that, particularly in this market, it's not one person buying. So it's not just about going, right, we need to understand like this person's impact and metrics and la la la. And there is an economic buyer and we've got them somewhere in our deal chart and we're going to get someone to tap into them at the right stage. This could hit lots of people. And I think probably one of the biggest reasons why deals stall is because someone who had an influence or a recommendation or a decision making power within that process, we didn't understand that they were even there. And then they come in with their own criteria. And if we haven't even thought about that, like we're screwed because straight away they just feel like, well, you weren't even like taking us, we're treating us with importance. But then if we go into it with a very traditional way of thinking, which is this is like a person that we're supposed to multi-thread to, and like we don't really get taught on how to go in multi-thread, then it's like a part of the sales process that people aren't really taught on. Because what do you go and do, like MEDDIC with every single person? Like, how does that work? So when you're thinking about in this market where this kind of like quite tunnel vision, horse with the blinkers on, qualification mentality comes in, when the reality is a good AE nowadays is probably going to have to speak to 5, 10 people inside that business to orchestrate and project manage that deal through to them getting the outcome. Tell me about like what your thoughts are in that domain.
So in most scenarios, you're most likely having 1 to 2 potential 3 decision makers show up to the first call, right? Because as much as you're doing what you believe to be discovery, they're doing discovery on whether it's worth the next decision maker's time to be brought on board, right? And so, when you look at the multi-threading that can happen, you have multiple people that are involved more than ever, right? You think about, in tech, if you're selling tech, any SaaS product, eventually a CTO's got to be involved, right? CFO's making the financial decisions. Typically the CEO is going to be involved. And then there's director levels that are typically the first people that you're talking to, right? So what buyer coding teaches you to do is create the connection, understand what's truly most important to the first person you're talking to, because they, right, are going to be your champion. And you need to essentially get them on your side. There has to be a true connection. They have to have trust there. Once we've established that, and this can be on the first call, we then take that next layer, just like any other sales process teaches you, identify who else is involved in the buying decision. And then through the right discovery questions and the right needs analysis questions, you start to layer this in a way that you understand how they like to buy, right? So, I will ask, and I'm teaching our reps to do this as well, where you're asking multi-layered questions to really find out not only are the person you're talking to, what's important to them, right? And how they like to buy and what buyer code we can assess to them, but take it a step further and determine the CFO and the CTO, how is it that they like to buy? What are the things that they're going to need to see to continue to build the trust? And so I'm well prepared for that next decision maker. But the first goal is create the proper connection and the trust with the first 1 or 2 people that are on the call.
I would imagine a lot of people would say that their team struggles to identify and build a champion.
Sure.
So where do you think a lot of people go wrong, particularly maybe sales reps, when they come off the call with happy ears because they got on really well? Tell me about
Right.
like the challenge that you see consistently being made.
So I like the Sandler example that you brought up. So Sandler is one of those sales processes, which I was also trained on, that's very much rooted in sales psychology. However, if your whole thought process is when you get on a call, you have to qualify, right? And then identify pain, you will see very quickly in this market how challenging it is to discover pain quickly on the first call. And not only that, when you do it, it's so obvious, right? That the customer in a lot of cases say, yeah, this happens all the time. We don't really have that much pain. We just want to explore and see what else is out there. This happened. I mean, this is so common, right? And don't get me wrong. There's definitely more, I'm a fan of peel the onion back, right? And continue to try to identify pain. But one of the things that I've learned very quickly is not everyone who jumps on the call truly has pain. They are either running from pain or they're running towards gain, right? And so if you think about just simplifying the process in a way where you're only looking for pain, right, you're missing things. And so rather than focusing on just pain or just gain, what buyer coding teaches you to do is try to identify what is important to them. It doesn't have to be pain. It doesn't necessarily have to be gain, although you can compartmentalize their answers into those one or two questions, but it's what's important to them in terms of how they typically make decisions, right? And so I think that's the big difference, that you're going into a conversation truly trying to identify, right, what is most important to the person that you're talking to, right? And you're not boxing them in with the same boring ass qualifying questions. You're not showing up to a call, which is my pet peeve, where you say, tell me about your pain points, right? Like, they've heard all of this. They've heard of it. You're not standing out. You're not a person of influence. You're not consultative. You're showing up just like everyone else is. And that's what we're trying to change.
Yeah. What's keeping you up at night, right? They're like, what a brilliant question. Thank you so much for asking that insightful question. I think it's really interesting because if I think about it, I'm running a small business by speaking to lots of people in different capacities every day. So it's candidates, considering job opportunities. It's applicants who are like actively trying to, get an opportunity. It's customers who are experiencing challenges and growth goals that they need to try and solve. So lots of people who are all making quite big decisions about other people or themselves in critical moments in their company or in their life, and being able to tap into the person and their true motivations and see through the story that they're telling me to the truth of what they actually really need and what they really want. It's an amazing thing to do. I find it very intellectually stimulating, but I'm not currently using buyer coding, and it's a lot on my sort of gut feel. And if I think about the things that you kind of learn, give you rapport or influence and connection, often it's like you ask good questions. People like being asked good, challenging questions that make them think differently, and learning that difference when someone says that's a really good question because they're buying time versus you've actually really made them think is an interesting thing. And then whether someone is like really focused on, this person is just trying to move away from a situation that they hate, but they don't really know the direction yet. Their goal is move away, or they're trying to move towards something. And I was working with this brilliant psychologist a while ago who had a massive impact on my life, Sue Whittle. And she said, imagine thinking about moving towards and moving away from, like if you were stood in a puddle and your goal was move away from the puddle, you can jump in any direction and you can get out of that puddle. Whereas if you're moving towards something, you have a very clear destination in mind. And you really have to understand both if you're going to be able to understand what someone is trying to not repeat and escape from, as well as like this sort of dream state and desire that they're trying to move towards. And I know that you love psychology. So when you're thinking about tapping into not just pain, but gain and all the complexity around human beings like to make decisions, how are you seeing the world differently than how you might have been taught it?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the disruptor, right? Like when you really look at them and you understand that it really is as simple as identifying which one predominant way do they like to buy, right? And once you lean in and say, let's say, for example, someone is on a call because they believe their SaaS solution today is too expensive, right? They've heard that there's competitors out there. They believe that when they look at the line item, that it's too expensive, and they're slated to go out there and explore and see what's out there, right? Well, their goal is to probably get more product or get as much product, right? To gain more and pay less. Well, what does that tell you about how they like to buy? Nothing. Nothing at all, right? But the right exploratory questions, you can determine that maybe they're really just a defender. And so maybe although they want to gain something by trying out a new platform or a new SaaS, they are going to be very concerned about things that could potentially disrupt or go wrong. Their whole entire role is about, they look at their role as protecting the logo and protecting the brand that they work for. So you would think it's as simple as, oh, as long as I give them better economics and show them the value of the product has at least what they have, if not more, this is a done deal. And you start pitching them the way that you would a closer, right? Or you start pitching them the way that you like to buy. So you might be someone that overanalyzes everything and wants to look at every data piece and, looks at, everything with a fine tooth comb, and you give them extra time to review things and you're very soft, right? When all you really had to do was show them how this product wouldn't disrupt their current, right, status. And so I don't know if that answers your question, but it changes the way that the conversation flows. And it changes, the vibe, and you can connect with them a lot faster by looking at it just very, very different than the way that most of us have been looking at it for the past 25, 30 years.
So let's introduce the different types of buyer coding.
Sure.
So talk us
We'll
through.
go through them all. Yeah. So we broke it down to 5. So it's very easy to understand. And the 5 buyer codes that you're going to want to look out for. And if you start thinking about how you make purchases today, or how your spouse or your partner makes purchases today, you'll probably pretty quickly be able to identify the people around you that are closest to you, what type of buyer they are. But it's broken down into 5. And the first one's going to be an analyzer. Okay. That is someone that is looking through everything with a fine tooth comb. They are looking at fine print. They are looking at data. They are looking at, they want to see samples, invoices, right? They want to see every aspect of it. And if it's an SOW or it's a contract, trust me, they're going to read it, every single piece of it, right? And so identifying who that person is and understanding that's the way that their brain works is very, very important. And the best example I can give someone is, I am not an analyzer. When I pick food, for example, right? I think about something that I'm, been thinking about, or at the spur of the moment, what I'm hungry for. And if someone throws out an idea, or I see something, or I think of a place that I liked before, I'm already in the car on my way there, right? That's a closer mentality, which is one of the other buyers, a closer, right? Buyer codes, and the analyzer. My wife is an analyzer. My wife reads approximately 8 to 9 reviews, looks at every picture that's available on Instagram, goes to their review site, Yelp, and looks at the menu, then goes to their website, goes back to the menu, clearly looks at the pricing on everything, right? And determines what meal would she actually purchased if she was in that restaurant today, at this day, this month. Great example. She's an analyzer. I'm a closer. When we first started dating, it drove me crazy, right? Today, we're so well connected because I understand that's how she is, right? That ultimately, I actually look at it as a benefit. She minimizes our risk. There's nothing worse than going out to a restaurant, spending $220, and the food wasn't really that good. And all we had to do was go to the website or go to one of the review sites and do a little bit of investigation. So again, that's an analyzer. Defender is someone that is strongly opposed to change. right? It matters to them that the change that they make doesn't disrupt anything that they currently have going on, the status quo. As I talked about, the ones who are company people, they have to protect the logo. They are super, 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 allergic to making mistakes. They most likely have been burned before. So they're a defender. The next one is a validator. A validator, similar to an analyzer, really looks at what other people are saying. They review case studies. The quotes that you put on your website do really matter to them, right? The references matter to them. The referrals matter to them. Being able to speak to different people in different departments other than the sales guy matters to them because they can validate, and they'll back channel to validate if they need to, right? The next one is a visionary. The visionary is someone that is really excited about the potential of things, right? So this is someone that, if you had a feature that was pretty cool that you were excited and your head of product said, hey, you can start teasing this a little bit. That's the person you want to tell about, right? That's the person that you want to tell the story and paint the picture on how this is going to benefit this product to them, not just today, tomorrow. Or if you have up and coming integrations or up and coming partnerships, or you just raise a ton of money, right? These are all things that are really exciting to a visionary. And then there's closers. Closers want momentum. They want clear communication. They don't want BS. They don't want fluff. They want what they want, and they're going to be pretty clear on it. They'll ask questions like, how quick can we get this done? And that's a strong indicator that they're someone who's a closer. And so it's easy to say, hey, there's 5. Let's try to identify which one I'm talking to, or what is their predominant buy code? Because that's a question I get a lot is, can someone have multiple buy codes? Yes, they can. But the dominant buy code is what we're focused on initially. But if you pitch them incorrectly and you get caught up in something let's say you think that data is so important and you're talking to a closer, this is where deals stall. This is where deals get ghosted. It's about how you're reading them. So it's those 5. Easy to remember, easy to adopt.
So we've got analyzer, defender, closer, validator, visionary. How important is it for someone to understand their own buyer code before they can effectively spot it in others?
Really important. As a matter of fact, shameless plug, but buyercoding.com will be live in the next 2 weeks. And on the site, there is going to be a tab for an assessment. And that assessment is so that you can determine your own buyer code. So you're talking about approximately 10 to 12 questions just to identify who you are and what type of ways that you make purchases, and identifying. It's so important to know what your buyer code is, or the way that you like to purchase, that we even, put it on the website. Because what the biggest mistake, Richard, the biggest mistake, and I've made this mistake too, is assuming that the person that you're talking to likes to buy like you. And that is a bias that we all have, right? This is a bias. And so we're going into conversations assuming this. And that's the one thing I can tell you. If you can break that, right, it's going to make a huge difference on how you show up for your customers and how you show up in a way that it's very apparent that you're there for them, not for your own monetary or company gains.
Yeah. I can imagine this being a really fun team exercise for sales leaders and entrepreneurs to go and do with their teams. Like, I remember learning, Myers-Briggs and then discovering 16personalities.com, and you all go and do the 66 questions, and then you get I'm an ENTP, or I'm a commander.
Right.
And then you go, yeah. And then that's it. For the next 15 years, I'm a commander, and it sticks, but you never really use it. It's like you say, it's like we have this new knowledge, and it's 16 personality types. It's so complicated.
Right.
But we love doing it. And I remember those moments where people just learn something about themselves. And I think it would just be a really fun thing for people to realize. I would imagine a lot of sales leaders would go, oh, that's why I'm not getting this person to buy into my ideas, and they're trying to
Right.
drive change and performance through their team, and they're going, why is this person just so difficult? You know,
Right.
whereas these
Right.
three people, like my mini me's who are just like me, they're brilliant. They like get excited
Right.
by the same things. When I come in with a new idea, they're like, yeah, let's do it. But some people are like, whoa, and they're resistant to change. And I guess
Right.
this is not just a lens for sales. I can imagine this being very like in terms of like selling product solution for revenue,
Right.
but the idea that we're all the time selling. We're selling ideas into our teams, and we want them to come on the journey with us. And I'm wondering, like, because you're running with this your team with your own team. So, what
100%.
have you found? What have your team found out about each other that surprised them?
So I think more than anything, we've really focused on applying it on calls right away, more than anything. But in conversation in our team meetings, we've openly talked about like how we make decisions and boxed ourselves into one of those buyer codes. But I think where we find the most fun with it is jumping off a call, right? And this is my favorite part. We jump off a call, and then both me, the rep, and I are both looking at each other, and we're just waiting to see what each one is going to say. And then I'll say, you guys go first, and then hearing what the rep says that they've identified is their buyer code, and clearly understanding how they want to buy, and then following that up with, I know I'm going to go now. I got to go get this case study ready. I'm going to add to the pitch deck this reference. I'm going to work on getting our head of client success on the next call, because she's definitely going to want validation with the people she's going to be working with on a day-to-day basis. So I say that part is the most fun, is like, jumping off the call and saying, what do you think? Like, which one? Or sometimes we'll be off and we'll say, you know what? I missed that. Did he say that? Or did she say that? Yeah, absolutely. Wow. Okay, great. So then we know the dominant, right, buyer code is A, but B, we do have to cover this, because that would also, be a concern or something that'll come up. So yeah, I mean, it's fun because it's, I did a post not that long ago about like, Mario Brothers, where like when you get that level up and, it's like you become invincible, and there's levels of the game that you now can pass that you couldn't pass before. It feels a lot like that. And my team would say the same thing. So, yeah, it's making, I said this on a call, I said, it is making sales fun again for me. Yeah.
Yeah, because you love sales psychology, right? So I can
I
imagine
love it.
it's almost a bit like Neo in the Matrix when he goes, "Oh, I've realized where everyone's in this Matrix, but I can see the world a bit differently, and everything slows down. You get a bit more in control." It's
Yeah.
like learning
That's the key.
a different lens of the world that gives you a bit of foresight to go, because we're just guessing, right? A lot of the time we're just guessing, and we get a pattern that we know works. Like if we go and
Yeah.
send this type of follow-up message, which is a template, when we send this case study, on average, we win 40% of our deals, but there's
Yeah.
6 that you're not losing. And you go, well, that's just because that's the way it is. So you just don't lose, you don't get 6. That's just how it is. And I wonder how often, here's an interesting question for you. Lost reasons, right? So
Mhm.
everyone's obsessed with capturing lost reasons when we lose a deal.
Mhm.
But how often do you find that the reason why someone says they lost a deal has got nothing to do with why they lost the deal at all?
Very often, right? Or I would say, and this is every CRM I've ever been in, there's 30 to 40% of them that they don't have an answer, and they just throw it in the cost category. Right? They're like, it must be price. It must be price. They disappeared, which in theory, right? It could be price. But then the question becomes, why didn't you have enough of a connection that they would never call you or email you back again, right? Um, and I think that that's gonna happen. But what if we can minimize that? What if those 30% of closed loss deals, um, that don't have a reason behind it, we clearly understood that, they were very, very concerned about disruption, and they were a defender. And unless we could clearly display that this change wouldn't disrupt their status quo, right? then they weren't going to make a decision or not. And that be a key point to that close loss reason, right? So yeah, I absolutely think that it's going to be important for us to investigate and clearly understand the why behind they buy. And when we do that, even when we lose deals, we'll have more information. So when they come back around, we'll know, who those decision makers are, but more importantly, how is it that they prefer to purchase? Like what are the mistakes that we made last time in terms of creating that connection?
How often are your team going, "Oh, I got it wrong," "Oh, I thought it was that type of person and I lost it." But now they go, it's like they now have a thing they can hold on to, that they realize why they made the mistake. How often is that happening?
It's not happening very often because we're on calls right after. Like we jump on calls right after and as an exercise, hey, what did we identify on the call? Like, we still talk about pain and we still all of that, but what did we feel like was their buyer code? What can we do? Because here's the thing, to clearly understand, right, the way that they want to purchase is only phase one of it, right? Phase two of it is, what do you do with that information? And so game planning the information and personalizing it and customizing it in a way that feels like you were listening and feels like they were heard, right? Is the second phase of it. And so without having those conversations, at least for the next few months, I feel like it's a lot more challenging for the reps to adopt it. So I want to be there as someone to say, hey, what do you think? What do you think we should provide? Right?
There's so much scope to bring different parts of your business into this, right? Because if you think about it from a perspective that we have to bring marketing on this journey too, because if we're not, demonstrating who we are, and we're appealing and appeasing the analyzers, and we're not giving enough like very good examples for validators to come and pick up on, or we make our process so complicated that a closer can't get what they want, the clarity to be able to move fast and get their outcome, and we don't show them examples of people who were like them, who were had a bunch of like resistance around the fact that this might be a big risk, but then took the leap because they were defender. In an ideal world, I guess we should have ways of showing information, whether that's sales collateral or top of the funnel type marketing content, for all of those different buyer codes, because we'll probably need all of them, maybe even part as one sales process, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when I was training in sales, just coming up, it was about what they had called like impulse factors, right? And impulse factors where, those were the 4 things that you had to learn and understand that actually truly get people to buy. And this goes across marketing and sales, right? It was sense of urgency. It was fear of loss, right? It was indifference. And then what was the 4th one? But regardless, like if you looked at every info commercial, they'd have the clock ticking. The other one was greed. So they'd have the clock ticking. Someone would pick up the phone and during the product demonstration and say, I bought this product last week. It's the best thing I've ever seen. And then they had a number of items left going lower and lower, 300, 200. So they were covering, right, every impulse factor. And if you didn't buy today, the hostess didn't care because she was doing her thing. So she was indifferent, right? And now you look at that today and it's a little bit funny, right? Like, when you see people, the clock ticking, customers are like, really? You know what I mean? Like, I'm pretty sure it's going to be available at some point again, right? But yeah, I think the same aspect, if I can cover all, things that are important to all 5 buyers in my marketing collateral, there's a way better chance of converting. Yeah. Way better chance, right? And just like when we get to the sales process and we start having these conversations, there is an absolute way better chance of conversion. And that's really my pitch to people is like, look, I don't know that many sales reps that focus on closing ratio and conversion today the way they used to. I don't know if it's a leadership thing, but I know damn sure every CEO I talk to and every investor I talk to cares about it strongly. But I know that sales reps, it's almost that like look myself in the mirror moment that they don't want to do, right? But when you really look at the math and you look at the conversion, if you can get yourself a 5%, 8% conversion increase, we are talking about significant revenue, especially when you start talking about mid-market and enterprise level clients, but significant revenue, significant commissionable opportunity, right? And that's really my pitch. Like, are you where you want to be in terms of the financial aspect? If you're not, why not try something that's fairly easy to learn, right? And in the end, it's only going to make your customers like you more because you're going to care about what's important to them and you're going to build that connect faster.
Yeah. What I really like about this is bringing human beings' special ability to the forefront. And so all we see at the moment is AI. Right, rightly so. It's flipping amazing. And particularly we talk about like these buying agents and selling agents. It's likely that that will be the future, in the next 5 years, and the role of sales will change. We had Justin Parnell on the pod very recently, and he talks about how he thinks that there'll be whole new roles created where we sort of like clap CS and sales into relationship managers. And I, for a long time, said that I believe the future of SDR is not AI SDRs, it's RDRs, relationship development reps. Like that's the job of a human, is to build that trust, that connection, that understanding with people. And we're not taught that. We're not taught that. And the more we lose deals, the more we try and apply a cookie cutter, templated approach to our sales process, which is what automation has tried to get us to do. Just move faster, but with our templates. The more salespeople will fail, and all the data is showing that massive percentages. I always say these numbers, but from the Salesforce reports, 80% of sales teams are missing quota. RepView are showing that 70% of sales orgs are missing quota. It's a really tough time in the market right now. So if we can get human beings to utilize what is their gift, something that AI will find incredibly hard to catch up on, such as being able to identify the non-verbal signs of how someone likes to buy as a person beyond their role and beyond what the algorithm might tell us about. For a person like this is likely to be what they care about. It's just a really exciting thing. I just wonder, when I'm talking about that, this is the humanizing side of sales, our special abilities, our unique abilities that are being brought to the forefront in a world where AI is just trying to make us all sort of carbon copies and cookie cutters of each other. What comes to mind?
I don't believe that AI is going to take over sales process. Like I don't like, for example, if I'm buying something that's $5, do I need to talk to somebody? No, I don't. Right? Like I most likely don't. If I'm buying something that is $1,000, do I want to talk to somebody? Depends on, how much experience I have. If we think about SaaS, like there's again, back to the research, right? I could do a ton of research and determine whether this makes sense. Let's start going up the ladder though. At what point, 5,000, 10,000, just think about your own pocket. At one point, do you want to talk to somebody? I mean, for me, it's pretty low. For me, it's pretty low. I start getting up to thousands of dollars. I probably want to talk to somebody first. And so I don't think that's going to change because that's a psychology thing. And so, sure, will there be opportunities where I could just talk to a chatbot or just talk to an AI person? Yeah, absolutely. But I'm one of the people that are saying AI is changing everything and will continue to change everything, but it should help you optimize and be better at what you do. It shouldn't take over. Now, if you're not leaning into it and you're not learning from it and you're not utilizing it, as a co-pilot and as an assistant and helping you be better at your role, then yeah, you absolutely could get left behind. And salespeople that are not, don't have the mindset of AI is my best friend, then yeah, they're going to be in trouble. But even on the website, that we built out, we built out a chatbot because we want this to have like continuous coaching. So you can download the 10 slide PDF, which also comes with 2-minute videos of me actually doing the training and impacting and breaking down everything. So you get just under 40 minutes of video content, plus you're getting the slides. But we also are offering a secondary product where you can have basically Rich's buyer coding brain built into this chatbot so that you can prepare for every call, or you can take the scenario that you just ran through and utilize AI to help you prepare or to help you handle the next call. You could even have it pulled up on the side and ask it questions as it's going along the way. So yeah, no. And again, that's a great example of like, it shouldn't be there to replace you. It should be there to enrich you.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. Particularly the importance of relationships, right? And I know we talk about like go to network a lot and the value of trust and relationships with people. But if you ask someone, how do you build relationships? A lot of the time people are doing it through charisma, or like noticing that we have a shared thing. Like we're both Miami Dolphins fans, very quiet Miami Dolphins fans. But like we find commonality, like the way we're taught to create connection with people is quite old school. And there are some things that will always be interesting, because if we can always talk about Miami Dolphins, that's really fun. But does that make you want to buy from me? No. Whereas if I understand that for you want an outcome and you're quite clear on what that looks like. And if I bring you like random things that aren't what you're looking for, if I take lots of time or I'm not responsive, then it's going to be a massive turn off for you. And you'll probably, before I know it, you've moved on and you found what you needed somewhere else, because you're not waiting for other people to go and get the outcome. So I think it gives people a set of tools to be able to build relationships. So if someone, let's say in an interview said, you said you're a relationship type builder, you're very good at strong and building relationships. What makes you strong? You can say, well, what I've done is I've self-studied and learned about biocoding. And I've identified that within a few questions, I can identify what type of person we have, what code, so that we can connect in a way that they like to buy. And what I found is that increased my win rate in my last company from 22% to 45%. And it reduced my sales cycle from 60 days to 30 days. And I don't think anyone wouldn't hire that rep in a heartbeat.
Absolutely. And that's the story, right? And that's what the whole point of it is to take, and it's interesting, when you think about the why behind why you do things, right? This is weekends and nights and all of that, right? As you know, I'm a VP of sales, running my day-to-day job. But it is for that person just getting out of college, that guy just went from an SDR to AE role, or the guy that's an SDR and wants to be an AE role and just wants to learn, and just wants to get better at this and wants to level up their game. And that for me is what it's all about. I'm not, are we going to get rich off this? Maybe, right? Like, but for me, if I had 25, 30 younger people in sales reach out to me and say, hey, my CEO brought on buyer coding, you came in and you were a speaker, or my sales leader said I should pick this up and he was going to pay for the module training, and I cannot believe how much this has changed the outcome for me. That's what it's all about.
Yeah. I imagine a slightly different future, which is on bookshelves like this all around the world, there'll be the biocoding book selling more than 50 million copies, like the love languages. Because I think that there's going to be millions of salespeople around the world who are it's getting harder and harder and harder and harder and harder, getting more disillusioned. And if they can learn something like this to be able to bring a simple system around psychology that helps them to connect more with customers and help customers and achieve their own goals for their lives, I think this is something that, I don't know, your book might retail at $20. This is going to make people's a massive, massive difference in terms of their career growth and their commission checks. So I think this will fly off the shelves.
I agree. That was me, flexing my humility.
Visionary.
Yeah.
So I know, because you're let's just bring people like into this, like where you are today, right? So they might be watching this in 3 years' time, Rich. They might already have the book. They're going, they thought this might impact 20 people, this might be in a month's time when you've just launched it. So bring people into where you are right now in terms of this launch that you're involved in. And if someone wanted to get in really early and be one of the first people to go and learn about their own buyer code or maybe implement this in their own business, how can they become one of the first to get this new weapon in their arsenal?
Sure. So first off, this was a lot more challenging than I thought to actually put together and go to market with. So huge respect and shout out to all the go to market founders that are out there. I have been a founder for 9 years, but leaving and coming back 20 years later, I forgot how hard it was. But we're really at, let's call it final phase. So final phase is all the video content has been recorded and edited, and it's beautiful, and all the information is all built out in the 10 slides, and we're actually uploading it into what's called a stand store. So stand store is basically like a website. Think of like Shopify, but for frameworks and coaching and training. So it's going to be available through the stand store. But simultaneously, I am launching the buyercoding.com website, which will have the chatbot, which will have the assessment that you can take to identify who you are. It's going to have tons of articles that I've written about buyer coding and buyer psychology. It's going to have a lot of that. And then as we start to roll out the first, few, let's call it 20 new customers, we'll start seeing a lot of testimonials and all that. And one of the things that I'm going to do is I'm actually going to be willing to meet with the first 20 people that purchase it and run a 30-minute training one-on-one impact. So that's where we are. And so in terms of launch date, I've pushed it back a few times, I got to be honest. But I really see this, said this is most likely the last week of uploading. Next week is testing, and then the following week we should be going live. So if you want to get in early, which there will be reasons and incentives to get in early, one of them being I'm willing to sit down with you, that will be you just have to sign up through the stand store. And so we can drop a link in the pod, and then it's also on my profile as well. So visit my site, they'll be able to go directly to the stand store. So either way, the website or the stand store will direct you right to where you need to be.
Amazing. What message would you like to leave in the minds of our listeners today, Rich?
Probably a vision. I would say just imagine a world where sellers are just less robotic. They're more human, as you talked about this AI world, like bring back some of the human and where your tone is, exactly where it needs to be. And the conversations feel easy and the connections just are better. And, instead of forcing customers down some rigid funnel that you're calling a pipeline, you're having real conversations and you're leading with what's important to them. And I think by doing that consistently and showing up and doing it consistently, it'll change your approach. And when you change your approach to how you sell, as you said, things slow down. And as they slow down, you start to identify things and create true alignment. And that's my goal, is for you to be able to get on a call and your sales team to be able to get on a call and have true alignment. And that large percentage of customers that are ghosting you no longer ghost you. And, you watch your conversion go up and you watch your financial situation go up, and you're happy you're happy you learned about the 5 buyer codes.
Sign me up.
You're in.
I love it. Rich, thank you so much. It's been awesome. I'm so glad that we caught you at this stage of your journey. And I think a lot of people will just be very curious and want to get involved now. So we'll drop a link in the comments, either for a wait list or to get into the stand store, or maybe it's up and running because you're coming to this late and you should be buying the book and getting Rich to speak at your next sales kickoff. But he's going to come at a big price.
Right.
So Rich, thank you for your time. It's been a pleasure, my friend.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it.
Everyone else, will see you on the next episode. Thank you for listening. And if you enjoyed this conversation, we've got a newsletter called Growth Magnet on LinkedIn, where we take the best insights from all of these episodes and turn them into bite-sized format for you to enjoy.